Okay, it looks like we are going. And so, as Michael said, and Melissa, I could relate to what you said. I worked a year on this book. When the pandemic lockdown began, I lost my part-time job, and so I had motive and opportunity. And I spent the first month of the lockdown turning 80 of 108 articles I'd written over 20 years from Atlantis Rising into 2 books. And then I thought I was going to do the same thing and turn articles I'd written in the mid-2000s about dreams into a book. But Spirit had other plans, and I was captured by a muse, and I got up every single day for a year and worked on this book. I brought one and donated it to the library, but I did bring some today if anybody feels compelled. And this book was a journey, an amazing journey that I did not expect to take, but took me deep into things I'd read and studied decades ago, and into leading-edge quantum physics, into the science of working with dreams, and as I said, to places that I really didn't expect to go. And today, it's funny, I have to laugh at myself. I actually thought this was going to be a relatively easy talk to prepare for, because I thought, well, I can take just this one chapter out of the book, and that would be simple, and then if Poof wants me to speak again, I can do that again. But naively, so I went again into a very different place from this. So the title of this talk is Alchemy and the Spiritual Path, and I'll begin from a quote from Rumi. "You are not a drop of water in the ocean. You are the entire ocean in a single drop." And as I said, this was quite a journey for me and took me into many different places. So Egypt has called me from early childhood. My parents said age 3. I used to fall asleep on my uncle's National Geographic magazines with the pages open to pictures of ancient Egypt. And at the time, at its height, it's resuming now, but before the pandemic, something like 10 million people visited Egypt every single year. I believe that we sense that profound mysteries were known in that ancient land and celebrated in those ancient temples, and we long to bring that magic back into our lives. Our word chemistry derives from alchemy, which in turn comes from the Arabic word alchemia. According to diverse sources, alchemia came from the ancient name of Egypt, which was Chem, which meant black, describing the rich, dark soil bordering the Nile River. Scholars also believe that this carries the memory of hidden ancient wisdom that came out of Egypt as Islamic scholars and Sufis carried the knowledge of alchemy into the Middle Ages. Alchemy was the precursor of chemistry and was based on the supposed transmutation of base metals into gold, or to find a universal elixir for this purpose. Gold was the quest of the alchemists, and the ancient Egyptians used the precious metal in abundance. According to Greek historians, Egyptian mysteries that included alchemy came from the legendary Egyptian figure Hermes Trismegistus, which means thrice blessed, 4,000 years ago or more. The knowledge was encoded on what became known as the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, the Egyptian name of Hermes. This knowledge became known as the Corpus Hermeticum and is the basis of a philosophical tradition that went from Egypt to Greece and has flowed through time as an underground stream for thousands of years as esoteric knowledge. Medieval alchemists arranged chemical elements into the first rudimentary periodic tables and introduced distillation to Western Europe. Many sciences have emerged from alchemy, including medicine, metallurgy, physics, chemistry, cosmology, and astronomy. In this tradition, what is called the Philosopher's Stone, lapis philosophorum, which you may have remembered from Harry Potter, is a legendary alchemical substance claimed to be able to turn base metals such as iron, tin, lead, and mercury, and copper into gold. Spiritual alchemy, on the other hand, uses a chemical metaphor for attaining spiritual enlightenment. The transmutation of lead or other base metals into gold is a metaphor for the process of self-actualization and spiritual rebirth, the gold of enlightenment. Esoteric, hermetic alchemists direct their search for the philosopher's stone inward, using chemical language to express philosophical or mystical beliefs and aspiration. The transmutation by the stone has also been interpreted as a psychological process, most notably by C.G. Jung. While the tradition of laboratory alchemy has continued into the 20th and 21st centuries, alchemy's symbolic language and terminology have also greatly enriched efforts to understand the language of the soul over the past century, in part through the work of Jung. He saw what he called the unconscious as a treasure house of rich imagery and forces he called archetypes that could awaken the life of the soul. His perspective was informed by his own rich soul life and by his study of the literature of Western Hermetic tradition. His longtime collaboration with Marie-Louise von Franz, who translated many alchemical texts for him, as well as writing her own books on the subject. The Philosopher's Stone was the most sought-after goal of alchemy, as the stone also acted as an elixir with the power to cure illness, restore youth, and even grant immortality to those who possess this priceless substance. The Philosopher's Stone may not have been a stone at all, but another type of exotic substance that was variously known as the tincture or the powder. Efforts to discover the Philosopher's Stone and to understand the ongoing spiritual process was called the magnum opus, the great work. Psychologically and spiritually, the stone is an enlightened sage. According to Plato, the four elements of fire, earth, air, and water are derived from a common source called prima materia, first matter. This is also the term alchemists assigned to the ubiquitous starting material required to create the Philosopher's Stone. Symbolically, and in a spiritual sense, first matter is our unregenerated or unredeemed consciousness. In the 8th century, a man named Jabir ibn Hayyan, history calls him Gerber, was a well-known alchemist of Persian descent. He wrote of two alchemical principles, mercury and sulfur. These two principles revolutionized the understanding that future alchemists would gain on the nature of matter and its origin. Hayyan was a cryptic author who was careful to conceal the true principles of alchemy. He encoded his writing with a veiled style of language. And from this, we have the modern term gibberish, which refers directly to Jabir, since the unwise could not understand him, but other alchemists could. Author Idris Shah also devoted a chapter of his book, The Sufis, to a detailed analysis of the symbolic significance of alchemical work. He based his analysis on a linguistic interpretation of Arabic equivalents of a term for the philosopher's stone, azoth, and for sulfur, mercury, and salt. In alchemy, sulfur, mercury, and salt are called the three principles, and it is believed that all matter can be divided via alchemical processes into these three things. In astrology, these are called cardinal, fixed, and mutable. In Ayurveda, they are kapha, pitta, and vata. And in the Chinese system, the three are termed moving, not moving, and both. Salt is often impure when first collected, but through chemical processes can be dissolved and purified, which some alchemists compared to the purification process the human body can undergo. Mercury unites with sulfur to produce a manifestation, whatever that may be, whatever you are trying to create. In order for the energies of life to transmit their influence into matter, mercury is required. It contains the air of life and the water of matter. And sulfur is the element of fire and the principle of action. In alchemy, the process of growth and spiritual development was expressed as a series of chemical processes using the three principles. Alchemical work was described in 7 stages: calcination, dissolution, separation, conjunction, fermentation, distillation, and coagulation. Each of the 7 stages has a chemical definition as well as a psycho-spiritual process. Although the 7 stages of alchemical transformation are represented in chemical language, they form a spiritual perspective that represent the stages of the path. In spiritual alchemy, the athanor, the furnace, which is from the Arabic al-tanur, which is a bread oven, and is also the symbol of the alchemist, who is the burning ground, as the fires of the furnace burn away the false ego. So what follows is a very, very brief and superficial and perhaps confusing description of the 7 stages. Many books have been written on the subject, and Carl Jung devoted the last part of his life to reading alchemical texts and understanding, in his words, that the language of the alchemists and the process they described were the same as what he had perceived in the psychoanalytic process moving toward a state he called individuation. The first stage is calcination, and the key word is burning, and the element is fire. Chemically, the calcination process heats a substance in a crucible over an open flame until it is reduced to ash. In alchemy, calcination is known as the black stage. The color black represents chaos, that which is hidden and buried, and the material of the unconscious, and links the name to ancient Egypt. Psychologically, the process represents the deconstruction of the ego and our attachments to the material. It also refers to the prima materia, which according to Jung is the unconscious. In a spiritual sense, calcination refers to breaking our worldly attachments, the desire for status, wealth, and the need to solidify our personality. According to the alchemical philosophy, the development of a higher level of consciousness and refinement of the spirit can be hindered by these attachments. Calcination burns off superfluous elements of our nature that no longer serve us. We are purified by fire, and the hardened and dead parts of the psyche burn away. Our preconceived notions about our identity and beliefs are put to the test. Our ideologies and neuroses lessen their grip on the persona, enabling our true spirit to awaken. The calcination stage has been likened to the dark night of the soul, as our former worldview is dismantled and we undergo a sort of existential crisis. The beginnings of spiritual development are typically arduous, since our former identification is no longer valid, and we come face to face with the void. However, this is the beginning of liberation. Stage 2 is dissolution. The key word is cleansing, and the element is water. Chemically, this stage dissolves solid material in the way that salt dissolves in water. The stage of spiritual alchemy dissolves the ashes of the false self that remain. Psychologically, the second stage represents breaking down artificial structures and the rejected shadow parts of the psyche. The conscious mind lets go of control to allow deeper hidden aspects of the self to arise. Water can be interpreted as a symbol of the unconscious, which contains hidden parts of ourselves that we have either repressed or not acknowledged. Disillusion is the stage when we free ourselves from the inauthentic sense of identity and can be understood in Jungian terms as the dissolution of the ego. Dream work is especially powerful at this stage, since what needs to change is revealed to us through our dreams. Since the dissolution stage takes water as its symbol, it is associated with intense emotions, and as water often symbolizes the reservoir of our emotions. The dissolution stage involves the outlet of emotions from traumatic events that have been repressed. This stage can be cathartic as we free ourselves from past experiences, releasing the pain. The third stage is separation. The key word is discernment, and the element is air. Chemically, the separation stage isolates the components of dissolution from the second stage by filtration and discards any unworthy material. The pure essence is extracted from the rest of the mixture. Psychologically, this is the rediscovery of our true essence, which can be the previously rejected or hidden parts. We consciously embrace our shadow in order to decide what to discard and what to integrate into our evolving personality. As the first two stages were associated with fire and water, separation is related to the element of air. In a spiritual sense, it can be understood as separation from one's habitual thought processes or emotional trigger responses in order to distinguish our true essence from our acquired personality. We can now choose who we want to become, letting go of false identity. Separation is liberating as we free ourselves from negative emotions like resentment so we can become aware of our true feelings. We separate from our inauthentic selves and step closer to our essential or higher self. We no longer identify with the character or role we have been playing, but rather become awareness itself. The separation stage is a kind of shedding of our old skin. After the emptiness and suffering of the first stage of calcination and the fearful stage of disillusion, where hidden emotions emerge, the separation stage comes as a welcome relief as we experience the stillness of letting go of inauthentic qualities. Fourth stage is conjunction. The key word is quickening, and the element is earth. Chemically, conjunction recombines elements from the previous three stages. We recognize what remains that is of value and begin to combine these elements to form our authentic self. After the first three stages of purification by fire, water, and air, our disparate elements are brought together in the element of earth. This stage is the birth of the true self and the divine union of opposites to become something greater. We begin to feel unified in body and soul, but we are still drawing together different strands of our true self, and the work is not yet finished. Polarities come together, such as male and female, body and spirit, soul and matter, and harmony is achieved between the different levels of our being. 5 is fermentation, and the key word is putrefaction. Chemically, fermentation is the growth of bacteria in an organic solution. Psychologically, the fermentation process includes divine inspiration and the experience of synchronicities. This stage can be achieved through intense prayer, deep meditation, breath work, or work with psychedelic plants. Fermentation is the stage of living from intuition and knowing when to take inspired action while trusting and connecting to something beyond the physical. Fermentation is the decay of the old self and the rebirth of the true self. The first 4 stages involve discarding our old inauthentic self and drawing together the authentic elements within us. At the 5th stage, we catch a glimpse of a more refined, authentic self. The stage can be likened to the rebirth of the phoenix from the ashes of its own self. Fermentation can be a difficult stage since we fear losing our identity, which is associated with the old self. Spiritualization brings great relief as we begin to see the world in a new and more luminous way. Letting go of those aspects that no longer serve us can also be accompanied by blissful feelings of inner peace and contentment. The 6th stage is distillation, and the key word is higher purification. In chemistry, distillation involves boiling and condensing a fermented solution to separate the components and is commonly used in desalination. A liquid is boiled until it evaporates, and as the steam condenses, the essence is liberated from the matter. The distillation stage removes all of the remaining impurities, and nothing is left but essence. It marks the point at which our essence becomes spiritualized. In spiritual alchemy, distillation is a metaphor for the actualization of one's spirit, or in Jungian terms, individuation. It is the distillation of one's true self and represents a step up in consciousness as our core identity is freed from inferior elements. At this stage, the ego has ceased dominating behavior, and we begin to hear the voice of our soul. It also marks the point at which the conscious and unconscious aspects of our self are brought into harmony. The seventh and final stage is coagulation, and the key word is unification. Coagulation is where a liquid, typically blood, solidifies, as happens when we are cut and the body forms a scab. Coagulation is the precipitation or sublimation of the purified ferment from distillation. How's that for a mouthful? Psychologically, it is a new level of awareness and self-confidence that many experience as a permanent higher state of consciousness. Coagulation describes the process where one's essential self becomes whole. Coagulation releases what is known as the philosopher's stone. This final stage is said to be marked by the release of a fiery liquid energy that drives physical transformation and becomes the brain's ambrosia in Greek, amrita in Sanskrit, a hormone the body develops at this stage that generates illumination and enlightenment. This final stage, one's higher energy delivers one's higher energies, and it can be likened to the point in material alchemy where the gold cools and solidifies. Jung called this individuation. So what if you really knew that life was eternal and that you are a soul on a journey through time? Your destiny is to eventually become a son or daughter of the Most High. And what if you really knew, that there was a plan for your life and a roadmap for the spiritual path and our unfolding? There is a map, there is a toolkit, just waiting to be discovered. The hidden knowledge exists in wisdom traditions of every culture and has moved through the ages, always being found when the disciple awakened and learned to ask the right questions. Salvation is not an event, it is a journey of becoming. And this knowledge and this journey is where I was taken after 50 years of study and thinking I knew much back through. And so that journey and the practical tools of working with dreams as guides is what is chronicled in the book. And I will tell you, I think at some level I went through many of those stages in some form, and I am not the same person who embarked on that journey more than a year ago on a snowy morning in March of 2020. So thank you very much for listening. That looks like I'm going to stop the recorder.